Today, I want to share my story. I want to tell you this so you can learn a lesson from it. It's not an easy story to tell, but it's one that changed my life forever. It was an ordinary day, or so I thought. The kind of day that slips by unnoticed, like a leaf floating downstream. I was driving home from work, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the road. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was clear. The radio played softly in the background, a familiar tune that I hummed along to without really thinking about it. My mind was elsewhere, tangled in the mundane worries of life, bills piling up, deadlines looming, and the argument I'd had with my brother the night before. It had been one of those pointless fights, the kind where both sides dig in their heels and refuse to budge. I replayed his words in my head, feeling the sting of them all over again. The road stretched out before me, a ribbon of asphalt winding through the countryside. I remember the way the fading light glinted off the hood of my car, like shards of gold scattered across the surface. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm beneath my palms. The hum of the engine was a steady, comforting sound, a reminder that I was moving forward, even if it didn't always feel that way. And then it happened. A truck came barreling through the intersection, running a red light. It was like watching a train hurtling toward you, knowing there's no way to stop it. Time slowed, each second stretching into an eternity. I heard the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal meeting metal. My car spun out of control, the world tilting and twisting around me, glass shattered, raining down like jagged pieces of ice. I felt a searing pain in my side, sharp and immediate, but it was almost drowned out by the overwhelming sense of weightlessness. For a moment, everything went silent. The chaos, the noise, the pain, it all faded away. I was floating, untethered, as if I had been lifted out of my body. The air around me felt different, thicker somehow, like wading through water. I tried to move, to scream, but I had no voice, no form. Panic surged through me, a cold, clawing fear that threatened to consume me. And then I saw it. A light, soft and golden like the first rays of dawn breaking through a dark sky. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but warm and inviting, like a hand reaching out to pull me from the depths. I felt drawn to it, as if it were calling my name. The fear began to ebb, replaced by a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was as if the light itself was alive, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beat of my heart. I don't know how long I floated there, suspended between worlds. The light grew brighter, closer, until it enveloped me completely. I felt a presence, something vast and infinite, yet intimately familiar. It wasn't a voice I heard with my ears, but one I felt in my soul, a resonance that vibrated through every fiber of my being. "Do not be afraid," it said. "You are safe here." The words washed over me like a wave, carrying away the last remnants of fear. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, to bask in the warmth and peace of it. But even as I thought it, I felt a tug, a gentle pull that seemed to come from somewhere far away. And then darkness. When I opened my eyes, or at least when I thought I opened them, I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't even on Earth. I was standing in a place that felt both familiar and utterly foreign. The air was warm and filled with a golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was peaceful, more peaceful than anything I'd ever experienced. I looked down and realized I could see through my hands. I wasn't solid anymore. Panic surged through me, but before it could take hold, the voice spoke again. "Do not be afraid," it said. "You are safe here." I turned and saw him, Jesus. I don't know how I knew it was him, but I did. His presence was overwhelming, radiating love and compassion in a way that made me feel both humbled and cherished. He reached out his hand, and I took it without hesitation. And that's when the journey truly began. When I opened my eyes, or at least when I thought I opened them, I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't even on Earth. I was standing in a place that felt both familiar and utterly foreign. The air was warm and filled with a golden light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was peaceful, more peaceful than anything I'd ever experienced. I looked down and realized I could see through my hands. I wasn't solid anymore. Panic surged through me, but before it could take hold, the voice spoke again. "Do not be afraid," it said. "You are safe here." I turned and saw him, Jesus. I don't know how I knew it was him, but I did. His presence was overwhelming, radiating love and compassion in a way that made me feel both humbled and cherished. He reached out his hand, and I took it without hesitation. As soon as our hands touched, the world around me shifted. The golden light intensified, and I felt a warmth spread through me, like drinking a cup of hot tea on a cold winter's day. It wasn't just physical warmth. It was a deep, soul-soothing comfort that eased every ache and worry I'd ever carried. We began to walk, though I'm not sure if walk is the right word. It felt more like gliding, as if the ground itself was moving beneath us. The landscape around us was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Rolling hills of vibrant green stretched out in every direction, dotted with flowers that shimmered like they were made of starlight. The air was filled with a sweet floral scent, and I could hear the faint sound of music, like a choir singing in the distance. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is a place beyond time and space," Jesus replied, "a place where the soul can rest and reflect." His voice was calm and steady, but there was a depth to it that seemed to resonate with something deep inside me. It was as if he knew every thought, every fear, every hope I'd ever had. As we continued to walk, I noticed that the landscape was changing. The hills gave way to a vast, crystal-clear lake, its surface so smooth it looked like glass. The water reflected the golden light, creating a dazzling display of colors that danced and shimmered. "Look," Jesus said, pointing to the lake. I followed his gaze and saw figures standing by the water's edge. They were faint at first, like shadows, but as I focused, they became clearer. I recognized them, my grandparents who had passed away years ago and a childhood friend who had died in a tragic accident. They looked just as I remembered them, but there was something different about them. They glowed with the same golden light that surrounded us, and their eyes sparkled with joy and peace. "They're here," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "Yes," Jesus said, "they are waiting for you, but it is not your time yet." I wanted to run to them, to hug them and tell them how much I'd missed them, but Jesus gently held me back. "There is more you need to see," he said. He led me away from the lake, and the landscape shifted again. We were now in a vast open field with a sky that stretched out endlessly above us. The stars were brighter than I'd ever seen them, and they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Look up," Jesus said. I tilted my head back and gasped. The stars were moving, swirling and dancing in patterns that told a story. I saw images forming scenes of people helping each other, of love and kindness, of hope and redemption. It was like watching a movie, but one that I could feel in my soul. "This is the essence of life," Jesus said. "Love is the thread that connects all things." As I watched, the stars began to form a single, glowing figure, a heart pulsating with light. It was beautiful, but it was also overwhelming. I felt a deep sense of awe and reverence, as if I were standing in the presence of something far greater than myself. "Remember this," Jesus said, "no matter what happens, love is the answer. It is the light that will guide you through the darkest times." I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of his words settled over me, filling me with a sense of purpose and clarity. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the vision faded. The stars returned to their places in the sky, and the landscape around us shifted once more. "It's time to go back," Jesus said. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep sense of gratitude. I had seen things that I could never have imagined, and I knew that they would stay with me forever. As he led me back to the golden light, I felt a pull, like a cord tightening around my chest. Jesus smiled at me and said, "It's not your time yet. You have work to do." Before I could respond, I was falling, tumbling through darkness until I landed back in my body with a gasp. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. My family was there, their faces pale with worry. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My brother, the one I'd argued with, was the first to reach me. He took my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. In that moment, I realized how petty our argument had been. Life was too short for grudges, too precious to waste on anger. And so, my journey back to life began, with a heart full of love and a mind full of wonder. Jesus led me through what I can only describe as a series of visions. Each one was like a window into the future, and what I saw left me stunned. The first vision unfolded like a storm rolling in from the horizon. I stood on a cliff overlooking a vast ocean, the sky darkening with ominous clouds. The wind howled, carrying with it the salty tang of the sea. Waves rose like mountains, crashing against the shore with a force that shook the ground beneath my feet. I saw cities, familiar skylines now submerged, their buildings like broken teeth jutting out of the water. People scrambled for higher ground, their faces etched with fear and desperation. The rain fell in sheets, relentless and cold, as if the heavens themselves were weeping. "This is the first of the events," Jesus said, his voice calm but heavy with sorrow. "Extreme weather will test the resilience of humanity." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. It was the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, a reminder of how fragile life can be. The scene shifted and I found myself in the middle of a crowded city. The air was thick with tension, the kind you can feel in your chest before a thunderstorm breaks. People filled the streets, their voices rising in anger and frustration. I saw signs and banners, some bearing the name Trump, others emblazoned with slogans of division and defiance. The crowd surged like a living thing, a beast with many heads and no clear direction. "Political turmoil will divide nations," Jesus explained. "But remember, division is not the end. It is a call to seek unity." I wanted to look away, to escape the chaos, but I couldn't. The raw emotion in the air was overwhelming, a cacophony of fear, anger, and desperation. The third vision was quieter, but no less unsettling. I stood in a bustling marketplace, but something was wrong. The stalls were empty, their tables bare. People wandered aimlessly, their faces gaunt and hollow-eyed. I saw a mother holding a child, both of them so thin it hurt to look at them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional murmur of despair. "Economic collapse will bring hardship," Jesus said, "but even in scarcity there is opportunity for compassion." I felt a lump in my throat, a mix of sorrow and helplessness. The weight of what I was seeing pressed down on me, but I couldn't turn away. The fourth vision was the most disorienting. I was in a hospital, but it was unlike any hospital I'd ever seen. The halls were filled with people, some lying on the floor, others slumped against the walls. Doctors and nurses moved frantically, their faces masks of exhaustion and fear. I saw a man coughing violently, his body racked with spasms. The air was thick with the smell of sickness, a cloying, oppressive scent that made my stomach churn. "A new illness will spread," Jesus said. "It will challenge the world, but it will also reveal the strength of the human spirit." I wanted to reach out, to help, but I was just an observer, powerless to change what I was seeing. The fifth vision was a stark contrast to the others. I stood in a sleek, futuristic laboratory filled with machines and devices I couldn't begin to understand. Scientists worked tirelessly, their faces alight with excitement and determination. I saw a breakthrough, a discovery that would change the world forever. But as the vision unfolded, I realized that this advancement came with a price. The technology was powerful, but it was also dangerous, a double-edged sword that could cut both ways. Progress will come, Jesus said, but it must be guided by wisdom and humility. I felt a sense of awe, but also unease. The potential for good was immense, but so was the potential for harm. The sixth and final vision was the most shocking of all. I saw a moment of unity, a turning point where humanity came together in the face of adversity. People of all races, religions, and backgrounds stood side by side, their differences forgotten. They worked together to rebuild, to heal, to create a better world. The air was filled with a sense of hope, a tangible feeling that seemed to lift the very ground beneath my feet. This is the ultimate goal, Jesus said, a world where love triumphs over fear, where compassion overcomes division. Tears streamed down my face as I watched the vision unfold. It was beautiful, but it was also a reminder of how far we had to go. As the visions faded, I felt a pull, like a cord tightening around my chest. Jesus looked at me and said, "These events are coming, but they are not the end. They are a call to awaken, to choose love over fear, and to prepare for what lies ahead." I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of his words settled over me, filling me with a sense of purpose and clarity. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the journey through the visions ended. I was back in the golden light, standing beside Jesus. The peace and warmth of the place enveloped me once more, but I knew my time here was coming to an end. "It's not your time yet," Jesus said. "You have work to do." Before I could respond, I felt a tug, a gentle pull that seemed to come from somewhere far away, and then darkness. When I opened my eyes, or at least when I thought I opened them, I wasn't in the golden light anymore. I was back in my body, in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. My family was there, their faces pale with worry. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My brother, the one I'd argued with, was the first to reach me. He took my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. In that moment, I realized how petty our argument had been. Life was too short for grudges, too precious to waste on anger, and so my journey back to life began, with a heart full of love and a mind full of wonder. As the visions faded, I felt a pull, like a cord tightening around my chest. Jesus smiled at me and said, "It's not your time yet. You have work to do." Before I could respond, I was falling, tumbling through darkness until I landed back in my body with a gasp. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and the smell of antiseptic. My family was there, their faces pale with worry. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My brother, the one I'd argued with, was the first to reach me. He took my hand, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. In that moment, I realized how petty our argument had been. Life was too short for grudges, too precious to waste on anger. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of recovery and reflection. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen, the storms, the chaos, the hope. I knew I had to share my story, not to scare people, but to inspire them. I started with my family. I told them about the visions, about Jesus, and about the importance of forgiveness and love. Slowly but surely, we began to heal the rifts between us. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I sat on the porch with my brother. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. We didn't speak at first, just sat in comfortable silence, watching the world go by. "I've been thinking," he said finally, breaking the silence, "about what you said, about forgiveness. I've been holding on to a lot of anger, and it's been eating me up inside." I nodded, understanding all too well. "Me too," I admitted. But seeing what I saw, it made me realize how little time we really have. We can't waste it on anger and resentment. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "I want to be better," he said, "for you, for our family, for myself." Tears welled up in my eyes and I reached out to squeeze his hand. "We'll do it together," I promised. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice small changes in myself and those around me. My brother and I started spending more time together, rebuilding the bond we had lost. We laughed, we talked, and we forgave. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk in the park. The sun was warm on my skin, and the gentle breeze carried the sound of children laughing and birds singing. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. As I walked, I noticed a man sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. He looked lost, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside him. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've lost everything, my job, my home, my family. I don't know what to do." My heart ached for him, and I remembered the visions I had seen, the economic collapse, the illness, the storms, but I also remembered the hope, the unity, the love. "You're not alone," I said. "There are people who care about you, who want to help. You just have to let them in." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. "Do you really think so?" I nodded. "I know so. I've seen it." We talked for a while, and by the time we parted ways, he seemed a little lighter, a little more hopeful. As I continued my walk, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I knew I had to share my story, to spread the message of love and hope. I started small, talking to friends and family, then gradually reaching out to others. I shared my experience, the visions I had seen, and the lessons I had learned. People listened, their eyes filled with curiosity and hope. One evening, as I stood in front of a small group of people sharing my story, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. I knew I was doing what I was meant to do, what Jesus had sent me back to do. As I looked out at the faces before me, I saw a glimmer of hope, a spark of light in the darkness. And I knew, no matter what the future held, that love would always be the answer. And so my journey back to life continued, with a heart full of love and a mind full of wonder. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but I also knew that with love, hope, and forgiveness, we could overcome anything.